For the time being, please keep in mind the men and women who came before you and cleared the path for your success and fame. Some of the most hilarious moments in television history were produced by John Clay. His life, however, is a different story at 85. He's astonishingly impoverished, even though he makes millions from Monty Python and Fawlty Towers. He lost $25 million as a result of 3 cruel divorces. He kept less money than his third wife received. He now works countless tours in order to make ends meet. They are referred to as his alimony tours. The legendary comedian who entertained us for decades is unable to afford to retire. How did his fortune actually turn out? You will be shocked by the truth. On October 27, 1939, John Cleese was born in Somerset's Weston-super-Mare, a beach town. Although his boyhood home at 27 Locking Road appeared to be a typical suburban home, it was actually a family that was molded by rigid rituals and respectability typical of the middle class. In order to avoid the ridicule that accompanied such an odd last name, his father, Reginald Francis Cleese, had altered the family name from Cheese to Clay. Reginald was employed by the Prudential Assurance Company as an insurance salesman. He collected tiny monthly premiums by going door to door. The family was in the lower middle class, but the employment was modest and paid the bills. Muriel Evelyn Cross, his mother, was a homemaker who placed a high value on social graces and appearances. Together, they established a household where social acceptability was crucial and financial concerns were widespread. Cleese's keen sense of humor in class, regulations, and the ridiculous rhythms of everyday British life was influenced by these early stresses. Cleese was 6 feet tall by the time he turned 12. He stood out in every situation due to his extraordinary height. At the preparatory school of Street Peter, he was dubbed skyscraper and beanpole by his peers. And because he was taller than the others, teachers frequently called attention to him. Even everyday tasks became challenging. It was necessary to order his uniforms specifically. The regular desks were too small for him. Additionally, he appeared out of place among the kids in school photos, looking like an adult. He became self-conscious instead of proud, slouching in an attempt to make himself smaller. In addition to leaving scars, the frequent taunting helped him develop the physical humor that would eventually make him famous, particularly in his exaggerated on-screen and stage gestures and walks. He became witty as a result of the bullying he endured. It was merely a means of survival at first. A witty joke or a well-timed comment could change the subject and even make his tormentors chuckle. In front of his bedroom mirror, he rehearsed his phrases and facial expressions until he could deliver them precisely on time. His father subtly viewed his fast tongue as a survival tactic, while his mother feared it may get him in trouble. Cleese eventually had the ability to read people's emotions and recognize when a joke could make a situation more amicable. His greatest strength was what had begun as a defense. Cleese moved to Bristol's esteemed Clifton College in 1953, where he concealed his concerns under a facade of success. In addition to becoming an accomplished cricket bowler, he was a gifted student of Latin, Greek, and English literature. At last, he discovered a position where his height was advantageous. He joined the Elite 20 Club, which is only open to the top pupils at the school, and was selected as the leader of his house. To everyone else, he appeared to be the ideal student, talented, self-assured, and intelligent. He actually felt alienated and worried that his family's lowly origins would make him stand out from his more affluent peers. To ensure that he never came across as unprepared, he studied late into the night and committed texts to memory, unaware that his wit and confidence were well-crafted defenses established over years of hardship. His teachers praised his maturity and leadership. Cleese was accepted to study law at Downing College in Cambridge in 1958. He had to wait 2 years before beginning. Even though Pembroke College had been his first choice, since so many students who had put off their studies for national service were starting at the same time. He taught in his former preparatory school at that period. The renowned Footlights Theatrical Club was his target when he eventually made it to Cambridge. He was initially turned away, but he persisted. He co-wrote the 1961 review show's content with fellow student Alan Hutcherson, and by 1962, he was the club's registrar. His actual path soon became apparent after what started off as an attempt to pursue a legal career. He got to know Graham Chapman there, a collaboration that would alter the course of comedy. They used a unique writing approach. Cleese would do the majority of the work, while Chapman would be silent for extended periods of time until coming up with an idea that frequently changed the sketch. The sketch of the dead parrot was among the most well-known examples. It became one of Monty Python's most remembered pieces after Chapman proposed substituting a dead Norwegian blue parrot for the broken toaster that Clay had originally written about. A Clump of Plinths was performed by Cleese and the Footlights Troupe at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in 1963. On July 10th of that year, the successful production relocated to London's West End. Some spectators were perplexed by the new name, Cambridge Circus, believing it to be the actual place. Future celebrities: Tim Brooke-Taylor, David Hatch, Bill Oddie, Chris Stewart Clark, Joe Kendall, and Graham Chapman were among the cast members. In the summer of 1964, the show traveled to New Zealand, where they taped a television special and 4 radio shows that were shown in November and December of the same year. The company then relocated off Broadway after performing on Broadway in September. When they performed for a sizable American audience on The Ed Sullivan Show in October 1964, they gained the most notoriety. Parlophone had previously contributed to their fame in 1963 with the release of an album of their songs and sketches, which was produced by George Martin. In his autobiography, Cleese later acknowledged that he lost his virginity in 1964 while touring New Zealand with the Cambridge Circus at the age of 24. According to him, it was an unexpected and nearly unintentional moment that was shaped more by coincidence than by pursuit. He clarified that he had little opportunity for romance prior to Cambridge because of the highly asexual milieu in his hometown of Weston-super-Mare. This late start showed a different side of him, one that was more reserved and socially awkward than many had thought. Following Cambridge, police joined Graham Chapman's Frost Report in 1965. Eric Idle, Terry Jones, Michael Palin, Bill Oddie, Tim Brooke-Taylor, Barry Cryer, Marty Feldman, Ronnie Barker, and Ronnie Corbett were among the talented members of the writing team. The ensemble rose to prominence in British humor. Clay appeared in the well-known Class sketch on April 7, 1966, standing next to Ronnie Barker and Ronnie Corbett, whose varying heights accurately represented the working, middle, and high classes. Cleese, who stood 6, exuded a powerful presence that epitomized the upper class. The British Film Institute later praised the sketch's simplicity and crispness, making it a classic. British television was irrevocably altered in 1969. The BBC One debut of Monty Python's Flying Circus on October 5th was unlike anything viewers had ever seen. A month prior, on September 7th, the first episode had been recorded, marking the start of the 45 episodes that would span 4 series. It was more than a comedy show. It dismantled the conventional sketching method, disregarding clean punchlines and well-structured narratives. Rather, it jumped from one ridiculous moment to another like a flood of arbitrary thoughts. The ensemble tested the limits of comedy with their uncommon creative freedom. Later, they were likened to the Beatles' influence on music. They were unquestionably comic innovators by the time they were honored with the BAFTA Award for Outstanding British Contribution to Cinema in 1988. The Dead Parrot sketch from the Full Frontal Nudity episode is among their most well-known moments. The shopkeeper's refusal to acknowledge the death of a bird turned into more than just a joke. It assimilated into British society. Even Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher cited it in a speech years later. Even though she didn't fully get the joke, it was so popular with the audience that when it was performed live, people would recite the lines with the actors, making it nearly impossible to perform. However, the group was dealing with significant challenges behind the laughs. One of Monty Python's most talented characters, Graham Chapman, struggled with alcoholism, which worsened over the course of the show. John Cleese said that he had become weary of putting up with Chapman's drinking by the 3rd season. When Monty Python and the Holy Grail was being filmed in 1975, things got out of hand. Delirium tremens, a severe disease that occurs when strong drinkers abruptly quit, was Chapman's condition. It typically affects those who have consumed 7 or 8 pints of beer or half a liter of liquor daily for at least 10 years. Once a skilled mountain climber, Chapman was unable to even pass the bridge of death scenario without a body double due to the severity of the sickness. Chapman was occasionally too inebriated to perform at college shows, according to Michael Palin's later diary entries. which resulted in arguments with Cleese following shows. Chapman finally understood that he had to quit drinking, but the harm was too great. He was only 48 when he passed away. He was openly gay, but also privately alcoholic, according to many, which serves as a reminder of the anguish that lies beneath his talent. Cleese himself had to deal with yet another pivotal moment. He thought the show was becoming less interesting toward the conclusion of the third season. Eric Idle later claimed that Cleese was the type of man who became bored more easily than the others and never cared about being liked. He had considered quitting after the second series, but on a flight to Toronto, he eventually declared to the group, "I want out." Only two of the series' three sketches, Dennis Moore and Cheese Shop, seemed genuinely unique to Clay, who acknowledged that the others felt repurposed. He had formally stepped away, even though he received credit on 3 episodes of the 4th series. There was no denying the change. The 4th season concluded after only 6 episodes, when the previous seasons had 13 apiece. An era came to an end when the show's title was abbreviated in the credits to just Monty Python. One of the most memorable characters to ever appear on television was Basil Fawlty. He owned a hotel and treated his patrons more like issues than like customers, giving the impression that he detested being hospitable. Basil, portrayed by John Clay, was a sharp-tongued, cynical snob who desired for his hotel to draw affluent guests. But it was always thrown into disarray by his own rage. In 1980, Cleese won the British Academy Television Award for Best Entertainment Performance because of his outstanding performance. According to a 2001 Channel 4 survey, Homer Simpson is the greatest TV character of all time, with Basil coming in second. His ability to transform common human imperfections into outrageous humor is what made him so unforgettable. But it was always thrown into disarray by his own rage. In 1980, Cleese won the British Academy Television Award for Best Entertainment Performance because of his outstanding performance. According to a 2001 Channel 4 survey, Homer Simpson is the greatest TV character of all time, with Basil coming in second. His ability to transform common human imperfections into outrageous humor is what made him so unforgettable. He was simultaneously vile and interesting due to his outbursts, sarcasm, and unrelenting annoyance, making him a figure that the UK still recognizes decades after the show's conclusion. The perfectionist nature of Fawlty Towers itself was what made it so amazing. Only 12 episodes were produced, and it was divided into 2 series between 1975 and 1979. Before filming, Cleese and his co-writer Connie Booth worked through around 10 revisions of each script in an effort to make sure everything was flawless. They declined the opportunity to produce more episodes because they were so dedicated to quality. They were afraid that producing additional episodes only for financial gain would degrade the show's reputation, despite the fact that it was incredibly popular and could have brought them a lot. Given that the 2 series were separated by 4 years, the choice seemed odd at the time, but it turned out to be wise. Their decision to prioritize quality above number gave Fawlty Towers a permanent place in history, as evidenced by their 2000 designation as the best British television series of all time by the British Film Institute. Even the source of Basil Fawlty's inspiration was startling. Donald Sinclair, a former lieutenant captain in the Royal Navy who operated the Glen Eagles Hotel in Tuck, served as the model for the figure created by Cleese. It was so awful that it became comic gold when the Monty Python crew stayed there in May 1970 to film Flying Circus. Sinclair's actions were nearly unthinkable. When a guest inquired for the next bus's arrival time, he once threw a bus timer at them. Convinced it was a bomb, Sinclair concealed Eric Idle's bag behind a wall in the yard as it began to tick due to an alarm clock. Because he held his fork in the incorrect hand, he even informed Terry Gilliam that his table manners were too American. Later, Cleese described him as the most impolite individual he had ever encountered. It seemed as though Sinclair didn't even want his guests to stay, according to a waitress who worked there. Cleese and Booth lingered to observe his conduct, transforming his rudeness into Basil Fawlty's genius, while the majority of the Pythons left early. As a tribute to the true man behind the lunacy, Clay even went so far as to utilize the name Donald Sinclair in his 2001 film Rat Race. Despite having only 12 half-hour episodes, Fawlty Towers went on to become a global sensation. Its themes of human foolishness, cultural conflicts, and socio-economic class resonated with viewers worldwide. Its structure and style were incorporated into American comedies such as The Office and Arrested Development, and its influence is still evident in television today. The show's popularity extended much beyond Britain, as seen by its timing and ridiculous settings, which influenced the writing of contemporary sitcoms. It is still regarded as one of the best comedies ever produced, some 50 years later. The career of John Cleese continued after Basil Fawlty. He co-wrote and performed in the internationally successful comedy picture, A Fish Called Wanda in 1988. With $188 million in box office receipts, it was the seventh highest grossing movie of that year. Cleese was co-writer and executive producer in addition to playing Archie Leach, with Clay taking home a BAFTA for Best Actor and Kevin Kline taking home the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. The movie gained him widespread acclaim. Later, the picture was ranked as the 39th best British film of the 20th century by the British Picture Institute. It is often regarded by critics as the pinnacle of Cleese's filmography, demonstrating his capacity to produce nuanced comedy that resonated on a worldwide level. Cleese had a successful job, but his personal life was equally complex. Every episode of Fawlty Towers was co-created by him and American actress Connie Booth, whom he married in 1968. Cleese portrayed the neurotic Basil, while Booth portrayed the charming and trustworthy waitress Polly. Despite their 1978 divorce, they maintained a cordial relationship, with Cleese later acknowledging that their marriage had been filled with love. Decades later, however, tensions arose when Booth disclosed that she didn't hear directly from Cleese about his intentions for a new Fawlty Towers project in 2023, but rather from the press. She expressed her surprise at learning that Cleese and his daughter Camila would be authoring it, demonstrating the complexity of their relationship even after all these years. Clay has acknowledged that he was frequently passive in romantic relationships, stating that his first marriage felt almost accidental. He paid a heavy price for this pattern, which persisted in his subsequent partnerships. He lost an estimated £25 million in 3 divorces. He spent more than $12 million in his third divorce with Alice Faye Eilberger alone. He was vulnerable since he freely acknowledged that he didn't understand money and didn't find it very fascinating. He depended on others to manage his money, which occasionally worked out well but other times backfired. From 1981 to 1990, he was married to American actress Barbara Trentham for the second time. His separation from Trentham was much more expensive than his divorce from Connie Booth, which had been done fairly and without the need for attorneys. It signaled the start of the financial and legal difficulties that would worsen throughout his third marriage. John Cleese had no idea how profoundly Alice Faye Eilberger would alter his life when they first met in 1990. She and her 2 sons from a previous marriage were residing in a cramped third-floor municipal apartment in London at the time. Her lengthy career as a psychotherapist gave her a presence even though she wasn't affluent at the time. She had obtained 2 master's degrees in educational psychology from Baylor University and had trained under Anna Freud at the Hampstead Clinic. She also had over 30 years of experience, which allowed her to have a thorough grasp of the human mind. She told Cleese early on in their relationship that she had a black heart, and if he ever ventured to leave her, he would see it. It sounded like an odd, almost amusing remark at the moment. It would turn out to be the most sincere caution she ever offered him. They spent 16 years together after being married on December 28, 1992. Those ought to have been some of Cleese's best years. With Montepathan and Fawlty Towers already ingrained in history and millions of dollars in royalties from movies like A Fish Called Wanda, his career was at its height. During those years, he amassed a fortune by purchasing a stunning house in London's Holland Park, without taking out a mortgage and adding properties in California and New York. The reality of the marriage, however, was extremely different in spite of all the wealth. Alice Faye made virtually no financial contributions. Later, Cleese himself said, "I got off lightly. Consider what I would have had to pay if she had made any contributions." In reality, he was unwittingly creating an empire for 16 years that would eventually be torn apart in the most agonizing manner conceivable. The divorce settlement was harsh when their marriage terminated in January 2008. The equivalent of around $20 million was compelled to be turned over by Clay. The sale comprised half of a Santa Barbara beach house, a £2 million home in Holland Park, a New York apartment, and £8 million in cash and assets. Additionally, for 7 years ending in 2016, he was required to make yearly payments ranging from £600,000 to £900,000. The figures were astounding. As a result, despite the fact that they were childless and that Alice Faye had nothing to do with Clay's success, she ended up being richer than him. The community property laws in California had permitted what he called a financial massacre, shattering his retirement plans and forcing him back into work in his 70s. Prior to the divorce, Cleese's Holland Park home stood as a symbol of everything he had earned from decades of comedy. What I find so unfair is that if we both died today, her children would get much more than mine, Cleese said in frustration. He later acknowledged that, despite having an estimated net worth of around £20 million, he didn't own a house or even a car, and that dream vanished when he was forced to move into a modest apartment in Sloane Square with a mortgage. It wasn't just a change of address, it was the loss of stability and security for which he had worked his entire life. "I'm surprisingly poor," he admitted. The stress got so bad that Cleese claimed he had suicidal thoughts and even went to a clinic for treatment after the divorce. To deal with the financial blow, he openly created what he called the Alimony Tour, which started in Cambridge on May 3, 2011, and traveled to Birmingham, Bath, Liverpool, Oxford, Leeds, Edinburgh, and Glasgow before ending in Bristol. The Times described the show as perfectly pleasant, but lacking the spark that had made him famous. The Daily Mail said he looked pathetic in the truest sense of the word. The comedy site Chortle added that he seemed to be pleading penury, and he had not even memorized the script, reading instead from an auto. Critics noticed his exhaustion at 71, traveling the world to pay off his ex-wife instead of resting in retirement. Even at 85, Cleese continues to work at a pace few his age would try. He hosts the Dinosaur Hour on GB News, participates in a Fawlty Towers stage show in London's West End, and has projects adapting Life of Brian and A Fish Called Wanda for the stage. Police himself acknowledged that he was performing only to feed the beast of alimony payments. The public humiliation was difficult to ignore for a comedy genius. He earned between $500,000 and $750,000 annually from his tours from 2015 to 2023. But the reason he continues to work is straightforward. He needs the money. He has been open about it, responding, "Well, you're quite right, but there's only one person responsible for that." In one of his few show of security, he gave the value of his Chelsea apartment as a response to the question of why he works so late in life. The flat was a significant portion of his remaining assets, and he acknowledged that the decision left him with little of his own. He explained that he wanted his fourth wife, Jennifer Wade, a jewelry designer who was 31 years younger than him, to feel safe. "I did it to make her feel secure. The greatest, saddest thing about our world is how many women feel unsafe. That's not a good society." Cleese has maintained one luxury despite his financial difficulties: stem cell therapy. He has been spending roughly $17,000 annually at a clinic in Montreal, Switzerland, for 20 years. The treatments, which cost him roughly $340,000 in total, involve cells that repair areas of the body by transforming into whatever is needed, from liver tissue to cartilage. He attributes his youthful appearance to the therapy, saying, "If you're buying yourself a few extra years, I think it's worth it." However, neither money nor treatments have alleviated the burden of loss, and Cleese has acknowledged that he has been depressed as he has witnessed an increasing number of his friends die. He mentioned a number of people he missed greatly, including Ken Campbell, Bernard Cribbins, Joan Sanderson, and Jeffrey Palmer. "Whenever someone mentioned them, I wondered, are they still alive?" He cautioned that approaching your 80s brings a flood of losses no one can completely prepare for. "And that's why Dad and I started feeling a little down." John Cleese has experienced multiple cancer scares in his life, the most recent of which occurred in June 2020, when he underwent surgery to remove a cancerous tumor from his leg at the age of 80. As one of the last surviving members of Monty Python, he feels the burdensome task of carrying their legacy while watching those who shared the journey vanish. His surgeon added to the scene by quoting a line from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, informing Clay that it was only a scratch. He handled the situation with his typical black humor, telling supporters on Twitter that it was a minor operation and making a joke about how, at his age, this kind of thing seemed to happen every week. The removal of the tumor from his leg was described as minor, but it marked a significant turning point in his health journey. It wasn't the first time he had faced his fear of cancer. In 1996, although some reports suggest it may have been in the 1960s, he had a prostate cancer scare that made him acutely aware of how fleeting life could be. He frequently said he lived as if he could be gone at any moment after that. When asked about life in his 80s, Cleese frequently quotes American novelist Philip Roth, who once said that old age is a massacre. Cleese cautions that no matter how much one prepares, nothing can fully prepare someone for the experience of reaching that stage of life. His ability to discuss it in a matter-of-fact manner demonstrated both his humor and his acceptance of what comes with age. At 85, he explains that aging is not just about dealing with physical issues like cancer, vertigo, or the need for stem cell treatments, but also about bearing the emotional burden of loss. He talks candidly about how it can feel overwhelming to lose friends and coworkers, to have your world shrink, and to lose the energy to do things you used to take for granted. Cleese has also been open about depression, saying in an interview with The Times that the deaths of his comedy friends and colleagues left him deeply shaken. He finds resonance in the word massacre, because it does not imply a gradual decline, but rather the abrupt ways life can change. He mentioned names such as Jeffrey Palmer, Joan Sanderson, Ken Campbell, and Bernard Cribbins, and said that each time he thought of someone, he would find that they were no longer with him. He described the pattern as painful and acknowledged that the sense of loss accumulated until it was too much to bear. And for him, it was not just grief over the deaths of specific individuals, but the heavy realization of losing a whole generation of people he had worked with and cared about. Given that many in his generation avoided talking about mental health, his candor about depression is remarkable, and he has even contemplated going back to therapy with a Jungian analyst, believing that Jung had important insights about the second half of life and the awareness of approaching death. When Cleese refused to remove the Loretta scene from his stage adaptation of Monty Python's Life of Brian in 2023, he became embroiled in controversy. The scene, which was written decades earlier with Graham Chapman, depicts Eric Idle's character wanting to have children and be called Loretta, while Cleese's character rejects the idea as absurd. Several Tony Award-winning actors advised him to take it down during a table reading in New York in 2022, but the police resisted, claiming that he had never heard a complaint in over 40 years and that now it was suddenly considered improper. He maintained that he had no plans to cut it. Elon Musk and other critics labeled the scene anti-trans, while others contended that it demonstrated the group's eventual support for Loretta. For Clay, preserving the scene was more about protesting what he sees as needless censorship than it was about the content itself. Then, in April 2025, at the age of 85, Clay gave one of his most vehement tirades, criticizing what he called joyless people, who I think are ruining comedy. Speaking to the Sunday Times, he argued that all comedy is critical by nature and that the humor comes from pointing out human flaws, explaining that while people who are always kind and cooperative may be admirable, they are not funny, and that comedy finds its place in our faults. He was especially upset with critics who rejected his plan for a stage musical about a fish named Wanda. His comments demonstrate how firmly he has positioned himself against what he calls the new rules of comedy, insisting that laughter should never be policed out of existence. He has frequently stated that audiences today are more sensitive than ever, which he finds ironic given that Life of Brian was outright banned in several countries when it first came out. He believes that critics who label comedy cruel are completely missing the point.